woman determined to make something of herself.
She knew she wanted bigger and better things.
He was her hard-working husband.
He worked his butt off, working 12, 14-hour days.
Together, they had it all.
He had really built, a pretty big business.
But early one morning, their dreams were shattered.
She said my husband heard someone break the back window.
He shot my husband! Oh my God! He shot my husband!
Was it a home invasion? Police would begin to have their doubts when they uncovered the couple's dirty laundry.
4 shell casings were found wrapped up in a towel.
Those 4 tiny clues would lead police to the killer and reveal the couple's shocking secret.
There was no way of getting out of that hole.
Something had been going on for a long time.
Kentucky, May 17, 2005. It was just before dawn on a Tuesday morning in the quiet rural community just across the Ohio River from Cincinnati.
On this side of the river, it has a very, very small town feel. It's quiet. Everybody knows everybody, and a lot of the people who live there have lived there a very long time.
But that small town calm was about to be shattered. Just before 5 a.m., the Campbell County 911 Center received a chilling call.
He's breaking into my house. My husband's fighting with me.
What's going on?
Someone is breaking into our house.
The caller, 36-year-old Amy Bosley, told the dispatcher where she lived. Within moments, a patrol car was en route to the isolated cabin in the woods south of town.
The call came out as a intruder inside the residence. So of course, my blood was pumping, headed down that way.
Would he make it in time to avoid a tragedy?
Stay on the line.
Oh my God! I don't know what to do. Oh, you can't go out there. It's my kids.
Where are they at, man?
With units on the way, the dispatcher dialed the caller, trying to reconnect.
Yes.
In the house now?
He just grabbed and he shot my husband. Oh my God! He shot my husband.
He shot your husband?
Yes. Oh my God! He shot me.
Ma'am, I have an ambulance and medics en route to you, okay?
Oh my God! I have to do anything too. Sorry. Oh, Bobby.
Moments later, the first patrolman arrived at the cabin.
You can see a light from inside, a silhouette of what looked to be a female looking out the window towards me.
It was the caller, Amy Bosley. She told the officer that her husband, Bob, had surprised a burglar.
The back kitchen door was open, and 2 of the panes of glass had been broken out of it.
The intruder had fled, according to Amy. But Bob Bosley hadn't survived the gunshot wound. It appeared he had died defending his children and his wife. Raised by a struggling single mother, Amy Pape grew up in the small town of Alexandria, Kentucky. Her parents had divorced when she was very young.
Amy didn't come from money. She would talk a lot about her mother.
To pay her bills while taking classes, 17-year-old Amy took a waitressing job at a local diner. One of her regular customers was an up-and-coming 23-year-old businessman by the name of Bob Bosley. Unlike Amy, Bob never went to college, but he was just as ambitious, maybe even more so.
My dad had hired Bob to do some work for him when Bob was only 13 years old. My dad paid him to pick huge rocks out of our backyard from a lot where we were going to be building a house. So even at the age of 13, Bob Bosley was starting a business. He was going around cutting people's yards, doing yard work, doing whatever.
He started his chimney sweeping business when barely out of his teens.
The business he started at our house, he said that he would like to do his own business because where I'm working, they're making all the money. He says, so, Dad, would you float me a loan and let me start my own business? So we did, floated him a little loan.
After a few years of hard work, Bob had paid his parents back.
Bob was a very hardworking person. He was like a workaholic.
He worked his butt off. I mean, he really built that business from working hard, from working 12, 14-hour days.
In addition to paying back his parents, all that hard work eventually allowed the 23-year-old to hire more employees, expand into roofing work, and move out of his parents' house.
When he got to the third worker, I said, Bobby, this is enough, because they were messing with soot and stuff like that, and we didn't want the dirt in the house. He started on his own, got his office, and he got real big.
He knew how to make money. Made a lot of money pretty quick.
Some of it Bob invested.
Bob had 21, 22 pieces of rental property.
But he didn't invest all of it.
He wasn't shy about spending it. He wasn't shy about flaunting it. I mean, he flaunted his money and the things that he had.
He was real happy with his little toys, as we called them.
Cars, guns, an airplane, and his pride and joy.
That very, very big, beautiful boat down on Lake Cumberland.
When he was on the lake, Bob partied as hard as he worked.
Bobby was wild and crazy. He was a lot of fun.
There's a lot of skinny dipping and things of that nature, both men and women.
Some of the pictures are, questionable. The same thing I would look at in a Playboy magazine or some of the soap operas. Had nothing that worse than anything like that.
It wasn't long after he met Amy at the diner that Bob invited her out to the boat.
She was a pretty good-looking girl.
Amy accepted the invitation. Community college wasn't the only path towards that better life she had always dreamed of.
She definitely knew that Bobby was in the right direction.
Soon, Amy was a regular on Bob's boat.
She was being just as wild as he was. She was taking her top off just like every other woman was down there on the boat.
Amy and Bob saw one another off the boat, too. The couple dated for 4 years, and shortly after their marriage in 1990, Bob convinced her to put her college smarts and organizational skills to good use, handling the books for his roofing and chimney cleaning business.
Amy was like the office manager and managed the business, doing bookkeeping, billing, and that sort of thing.
Bob handled operations, spending hardly any time inside the office.
He did not have a computer in his office. Didn't know how to use a computer, didn't want to use a computer. What he did was work. He wanted to be out on the roofs with his crew. He wanted to be cleaning the chimneys, do whatever needed to be done to make sure the job was done right.
Together, the couple's partnership appeared destined for success.
They just were a very thriving business. There was a lot of money coming in that business.
Their business wasn't all that was growing. So was their family. In 1996, Amy gave birth to a daughter. A son followed 3 years later.
She was a wonderful mother. Her devotion to her children was remarkable.
She always was very caring for her children. As caring a mother as any of the other mothers in school, as far as I was concerned.
After 10 years of marriage and 2 children, Amy and Bob's relationship had changed significantly.
She stopped going to the boat. Bob was going in there by himself.
After she had her children, her concern, her first concern was always her children.
I think that the children really gave her a purpose. She sort of immersed herself with these children.
Almost overnight, Amy transformed from lake-loving party girl to PTA mom.
She was always very much involved in the work of her children in the school.
And weekends at the riding ring took the place of all those wild parties at the lake.
They would be going to this horse show or to that horse show. Seemed like almost every weekend.
The little girl's father wasn't always in the stands, however. Bob spent much of his time on the job.
He worked really hard to make sure his business was successful, that his family was provided for. Those were all things that were important to him.
When he had time off, Bob still tried to get out on the lake whenever he could.
Bob was going in there by himself or taking buddies down with him.
She didn't mind him going down there because that was the only time he could relax.
But was he going down to the lake just to relax? Supposedly, Bob's buddies weren't the only people who joined him on the boat.
There were a lot of rumors that Bob did in fact have but had extramarital affairs.
Although according to those same rumors, Amy may not have minded that either.
She was as involved in that lifestyle at one point in time, and she called friends of his and joked with them about escapades that had gone on down there.
They had a very open marriage. Some described it as swingers. Probably the open marriage was more accurate than saying that they were swingers.
It wasn't the most conventional relationship, but it appeared to be a successful one. By 2005, with Bob barely in his 40s and Amy only 36, the couple not only had 2 beautiful children together, they had also built their own business empire.
He had really built, a pretty small, simple business into a pretty big business.
And as a testament to their success, that spring the couple started construction on a new castle-like mansion, complete with stone turrets, a gargoyle, and stained glass Bosley coats of arms in the windows.
The Bosley name. My parents were proud of that he was able to carry the name, and he was proud of it, and they were proud of him.
As their new home took shape, the family made a temporary move into one of their rental properties. A log cabin nestled in the woods south of town. It was a little cramped for what was, for the moment at least, a family of 4. Coming up, Amy makes a panicked call to 911. But will the police find any trace of the intruder?
Made-for-TV crime scene.
Early morning hours of May 17, 2005, police received a chilling phone call from a remote cabin outside the rural Kentucky community of Alexandria. The caller was 36-year-old Amy Bosley, begging for help as her husband struggled with an Moments later, the first patrolman arrived at the scene.
I walked inside the residence. Amy Bosley said, he was shot, he was shot.
Well, she said, my husband heard someone break the back window. He got out of bed and he was shot.
Amy told the officer that the intruder had just fled out the back door, but the patrolman pushed past her into the bedroom to check on Amy's husband, Bob.
He was still warm to the touch, and I was applying pressure to his wounds just to try to render any type of aid I could.
There was little the officer could do, however. 41-year-old Bob Bosley was sprawled across the bloody sheets, his body riddled with bullet wounds.
There was no help, and he was already gone.
Next, the officer checked on the Bosleys' 9-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son.
The 2 kids were just right upstairs. We were worried about the kids.
The kids were okay.
They had been hiding behind their bed for quite a while.
But downstairs in the master bedroom, their mother appeared inconsolable.
Amy was trying to jump on the bed, trying to grab his hand, saying, "Oh, Bob."
To calm her down, officers took her to another room and took her first recorded statements about the night's events.
Oh my God.
You didn't see who it was or nothing?
It was so dark. He stunk. Like, it was a really awful smell. And at first I didn't realize what was going on,
When you went out the back door, did you see anything else?
All I know is that I saw him headed towards the kitchen, and I was just like, oh my God. I think I threw up.
Soon, more police cars surrounded the small cabin, and officers poured into the woods behind the house.
They were looking for a perpetrator who had apparently fled out the back door in the woods.
We immediately called for a canine officer, and we asked for a helicopter, and we asked for assistance for air surveillance.
As the sun came up, patrol officers scoured the woods, and detectives arrived to begin examining the crime scene. To the untrained eye, the cabin had all the hallmarks of a robbery. from the broken glass in the back door to the ransacked rooms inside.
Every drawer, every cabinet, in the bathroom, the medicine cabinet, things knocked out on the floor.
Pills had been taken out of the bottles and dumped on the floor in Bob and Amy's bedroom.
The Bosleys and the rumors about their wild reputations were well known in the small town, and officers familiar with the couple initially suspected Bob might have known the intruder.
Bob has a very wild sexual life, really wild, and Amy does too. So I'm thinking it could be a jealous husband gone bad.
But after further inspection, everything about the supposed robbery appeared wrong to the investigators.
I've been doing this for 9 years. Why the would you touch a kitchen cabinet? That's what I'm saying. Get a loaf of bread. There's no logic to that.
And then there was what the alleged robber didn't take.
All that money's laying there. It's like there's just $100 bills in it. None of that makes any sense.
Amy did say Bob had surprised the intruder, resulting in the fight that led to his death. Could the interruption account for the pills and money the robber had left behind? Based on what they found outside the cabin, the police didn't think so.
The canine handler would say, listen, there was dew across that grass. I walked across it and I made trails. There weren't any trails when I started out across that yard.
It was yet another reason to question Amy's story about the mysterious intruder who had shot Bob and run out the back door.
That's where the bad guy would have had to fled.
An amateur ransacking, money left behind, and an alleged killer that got out of the cabin without leaving a trail in the dew-covered lawn. To the police at the scene, the implication was obvious.
It looked staged.
Made-for-TV crime scene is the way I coined it.
And if that wasn't enough to arouse the investigators' suspicion, when they asked her to describe the intruder, Amy didn't have a clear answer.
He's in dark clothes and he smells. That's it.
Later that morning, Amy's sister picked up the kids, while one of the detectives took Amy back to headquarters for more questioning.
I told him to just, get with her and get the facts, document it all out. And if she's telling the truth, let her tell the truth. If she's lying, let her lie.
Seated in an interview room, Amy appeared exhausted after the morning's ordeal.
Throughout the interview, she would be emotionally distraught, emotionally upset, think she was going to get sick, had to have a garbage can in front of her.
Through her tears, she recounted for detectives how she and her husband had been viciously attacked.
We woke up because Bobby was screaming, and I was like, what in the shit? And when you're in a dead sleep, and it's like, and this guy is standing there and he's shot. And that's when I started hitting at him.
According to Amy, that's when the intruder had turned on her. Although compared to Bob, she had gotten off easy.
I was scratching at the guy, and he slammed me back down. I only went down like my hip and my knee. And I was fighting him, and I was screaming at Bobby, and Bobby wasn't answering me. And the guy hit me here. And that's about all I remembered. I started screaming and yelling. I was trying to find the phone.
Amy did more than just describe the break-in, though. She also hinted that Bob's killer might not be a random intruder. According to what Amy told police, her husband had plenty of enemies.
He is a very wild organization.
I mean, he is.
I have a reputation for being nasty and stodgy.
Yeah, he's very confrontational, to say the least. I mean, everybody in the world knows him.
But there's so many things that he does that, I'll be honest, I don't know. And if I ask, I'm told not to worry about it.
The interview went from, this is what happened, to, he was on the wild side. I think he had affairs with women.
Bob's alleged affairs during their 15-year marriage were only the beginning of Amy's revelations about her late husband, however.
There were allegations that Bob was a drug dealer. Bob fronted money for drug dealing.
There's times my husband has money and I'm like, where did you get this money, or where? Oh, it's a job I did, something I didn't decide, don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay.
There may be a number of people with a motivation to do harm to Bob Bosley. Whether that be a girlfriend, whether it be a husband or a boyfriend, whether it be someone involved from a drug perspective, from a business perspective.
That's what Amy told the investigators in the interrogation room. But back at the crime scene, the officers searching the cabin made a startling discovery.
4 shell casings were found in the bottom of a washing machine full of clothes and water and detergent.
And normally if someone's going to shoot somebody, it's not going to take the time to pick up the brass and put them in the washing machine.
Particularly if the shooter was an intruder running from the police. To the investigators, it was yet more evidence that the crime scene had been staged by Amy.
She gathered him up, and what bad guy stops and picks up his brass?
That's what the police suspected. But first they needed to make sure that the 4 9mm casings were actually connected to Bob's murder.
We wanted to make sure the shell casings from the washing machine were fired from the same gun.
Comparing the casings with the bullets that killed Bob would have to wait until after the autopsy. All the police could do that morning was send the shells to the lab. They also released Amy. They may have had reason to believe she had been her husband's killer, but for the moment, their suspicion was based on little more than a hunch.
Her story wasn't adding up, and the scene was obviously set up.
And aside from Amy's hints about infidelity, the police also lacked a motive. But that would change that afternoon when the Campbell County Police received some unexpected visitors.
The IRS showed up at the police department, investigators for the IRS.
And as the Internal Revenue agents explained to the police, they were very interested in Bob Bosley's murder. Coming up, the police uncover a possible motive.
Everything was coming down on her.
But will it be enough for an arrest?
We wanted to match those shell casings.
Early on May 17, 2005, Kentucky businessman Bob Bosley had been shot dead in the bedroom of his rural cabin. According to his wife, Amy, the killer had been a mysterious intruder, most likely someone connected to the allegedly unsavory side of her husband's character.
Whether it was girls or girlfriends, or whether it was guns or drugs, whether it was bad business deals, there was a whole shopping list, if you will, of possibilities.
The police doubted Amy's story, however. Whether Bob's death was the result of a home invasion robbery or a targeted hit, suspect. The investigators received new information that could be relevant to the case. It came on the afternoon of the murder, when the Campbell County Police received a visit from the agents of the Internal Revenue Service.
Found out from the IRS agents that Bob Bosley was the focus of the investigation, and failure to pay taxes.
And it wasn't just their income taxes that were behind. The IRS hadn't seen a dime from Bob's business in years.
Their corporate tax, the employees' withholding tax, Social Security, Medicare.
In excess of $1 million in debt to the IRS.
$1.7 million to be exact.
They owed the IRS so much money that there was no way of getting out of that hole without probably losing the bulk of everything that he had built up.
But did Bob even know? After all, Amy was the one who ran the office, paying the bills and keeping the books.
She was the one that was supposed to be doing those things. That was her job.
According to the agents, Amy had also been their initial contact concerning the investigation. Back in April, about a month prior to the murder, agents from the local field office had dropped by unannounced at Bob and Amy's office.
They had showed up at the business, but she quickly took them across the street to the Dairy Mart and talked to them over there.
At the convenience store, the agents requested that Amy surrender accounting paperwork related to the investigation.
They issued some subpoenas on her for some documents that they wanted and other things they needed to get, and she had a time frame to comply with these subpoenas. They did not talk to Bob Bosley.
According to the agents, despite numerous follow-up calls, the requested paperwork never arrived. Amy gave them excuse after excuse, and finally, on May 16th, the day before the murder, one of the agents had called Amy and demanded to speak to Bob.
She lied to the person from the IRS, the agent who tried to talk to her.
Amy said, well, just a minute. So the person got on the phone with the IRS agent, pretending to be Bob Bosley.
Only it obviously wasn't, according to the IRS agent.
It was described to us by the agent as a woman trying to sound like a man. And she described it as Kermit the Frog. Kermit the Frog voice.
According to what the agent told the police, she had played along with Amy's ruse. But the agent had also upped the ante, demanding a meeting with Amy and Bob for the following morning, May 17th.
Everything was coming down on her. It was all coming up to that day of May 17th. The IRS was going to be there. There was no question that on that day, Bob was going to find out the financial situation that they were in.
He never would. According to what the agents told the police that afternoon, they had received a call from Amy a few hours earlier. It was shortly after the police had released Amy from the interrogation room and just before the Bosley scheduled meeting with the IRS.
She stopped to call an IRS agent to tell him that she wasn't going to make the meeting because her husband was murdered.
Had Amy murdered Bob to keep him in the dark about their tax troubles? Over the next few days, as the police questioned Amy and Bob's employees and family, a disturbing picture emerged.
She had positioned herself, I guess, to the point where she was able to manipulate the finances. And she could hide things from Bob, manipulate the finances enough that she was keeping him in the dark.
She had the mail held with specific instructions to the post office that no one but her could pick up the mail.
Amy had also screened all of her husband's calls.
She actually had changed his phone so that she was forwarding all calls that were being made to his cell phone to her.
And it got to the point where Bobby didn't get his phone calls when we were calling him, and she would take a message. So those are the things that, it weren't right. It kept us somewhat distanced.
Based on what Bob's family and friends told police, Amy forwarded some messages, but not all, especially not the ones from the IRS.
She's out on the roofs, he's doing the work, he's doing what he loves to do, but he has no clue that she's not taking care of her end of the business.
And a search of the company's offices revealed that Amy had gone even further to conceal the tax fraud from her husband.
What Amy Bosley would do is take all the information, take it to the accountants. The accountants then would figure up their taxes. They would prepare the tax documents for them to file. She would take it to Bob. Bob would sign, and it would end up in the drawer, and she would never file it. We found those. We found those in the business, which the originals, which had never been sent to the IRS.
As for what she did with the money, police suspected Amy had used it to support the couple's extravagant lifestyle.
I think between the two of them, their spending habits got out of control at the end. Their material possessions got a little high.
But with the IRS closing in, had she taken a final, ultimate step to keep Bob from finding out? It definitely sounded plausible to the authorities.
She knew that if he found out, not only could she potentially be facing criminal charges, she could be facing divorce. She's probably afraid she could lose her kids. Any number of things could have happened at that point. And also, everything that they had built, this world that they had built, with the property, the boats, the cars, the big castle, all of that was going to come crashing down.
It still would, just not the way Amy expected. As far as she knew, the police had bought her story about an intruder.
I was asked to please cooperate and not give her any inkling that they suspected her. It was very hard to sit back and allow her to think that we were stupid.
The police continuously told us that she was not a suspect, that Amy Bosley was not suspected of murdering her husband.
But the police did suspect Amy. All they needed was stronger evidence. And 9 days after the murder, they got it. On May 26, police received the preliminary autopsy and forensic report from the lab. It confirmed that the shell casings uncovered in Amy's laundry were the same caliber as the bullets found in Bob's body.
We wanted to match those shell casings before we got the arrest warrant.
Not only that, the autopsy results clearly contradicted Amy's account of the shooting.
He was laying with his back towards the person who had the gun. She said that the person was standing face to face with Mr. Bosley. There's no way that could have happened.
At that point in time, I felt like we were on our way to building a case against Amy Bosley.
At 11 a.m. on May 27th, 10 days after Bob's murder, Campbell County Police showed up on Amy's sister's doorstep with a warrant for Amy's arrest.
Quickly got her and walked her away from the house. She was very calm. He said, Amy, we don't want to upset the kids. Come on down. Put her in a car and drove her off.
That afternoon, Amy was booked into the Campbell County Jail on first-degree murder charges. Her bail set at $1 million.
The bond was at a high enough level that she couldn't be bonded out.
Coming up, Amy's trial date approaches.
Going into this trial, we could create significant doubt.
And the prosecution faces a tough decision. By July of 2005, Amy Bosley had spent a month in the Campbell County, Kentucky jail. The 36-year-old was charged with the murder of her husband, Bob. The authorities believe that Amy had shot her husband in his sleep on the eve of their 15th wedding anniversary, desperate to keep him from discovering the mess she had made of the couple's finances.
She got herself and their business into such a deep hole financially that there was no way that they were going to recover. And once Bob found out how bad it was, I think she was afraid of what the repercussions would be.
Amy no longer had to answer to Bob, but she still faced his parents, who were determined to see her prosecuted for their son's murder.
I met with the parents of the victim, and I promised them that I would never reduce this case from murder to a manslaughter. I felt strongly that we had enough evidence that we would never have to do that, wouldn't even be faced with that.
But first, there was a small formality they had to go through, a pretrial hearing requested by the defense to reduce Amy's $1 million.
Fully expecting to be there 30 minutes, tops. I mean, I've covered dozens, if not hundreds, of bond hearings.
But as soon as Amy's attorney started addressing the court, it quickly became obvious that her bond hearing was going to be anything but routine.
It really didn't have a whole lot to do with bond. It had to do with, let's start laying out our case. Let's start making this victim look like a bad guy.
It became this dress rehearsal for a trial.
And the defense's trial strategy was soon equally obvious.
Tactics the defense was planning on using was that to try to smear the victim in the case.
As part of your investigation, did you learn whether or not Mr. Bosley had, try to be tactful about this, but other intimate relationships?
Her attorney would do anything to make it sound like Amy never committed that murder. And it was a circus.
They were going to try to attempt to indicate that he was involved some way in drug trafficking, that he was a philanderer, that he had extramarital affairs.
Amy's attorney says he was simply doing his job.
It was our obligation as her defense counsel to explore every possible defense.
And according to Amy's attorney, that included exploring possibilities the investigators didn't.
There may be any number of people, other than Amy Bosley, with a motivation to do harm to Bob Bosley.
The defense also attacked the physical evidence prosecutors had assembled against Amy.
They were going to try to plant enough reasonable doubt in the jury's mind that they say, well, there's so much information here, we're just not sure if she did it or not.
In particular, the defense questioned the interpretation of the shell casings the investigators had found buried in the Bosley's dirty laundry. The authorities claimed the casings were evidence that Amy had hastily cleaned up the crime scene. But the defense offered a far more benign explanation: Bob's fondness for collecting and shooting firearms.
That was a huge part of their life, and I did not find it at all unusual that, just like we sometimes find coins in the bottom of our wash machine, that they would find some shell casings in the bottom of this wash machine with some clothing.
Before it was all over, the normally routine hearing had stretched to almost 5 hours.
That was the longest bond hearing I've ever been through.
The judge ultimately denied the request to lower Amy's bond. But had the defense's efforts been in vain, or had their trial run paid off?
I felt reasonably confident going into this trial that we could create significant doubt.
Amy's attorney wasn't the only one. As prosecutors left the courthouse, they realized that convicting Amy for her husband's murder was going to be far more difficult than they originally thought. But there was one thing Amy's defense attorney hadn't counted on. There were witnesses to the crime, 2 of them, the Bosley's 9-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son.
By virtue of having killed Bob Bosley with the children present, Amy Bosley effectively made her children witnesses in this case.
She's the one who committed the crime with her children upstairs. It was her actions that made those kids witnesses.
Carefully interviewing each child individually, the prosecutors learned some surprising new details about the night of their father's death. Details very different from the story their mother told.
They were both very clear that they heard gunshots before they heard anything else, before they heard glass breaking. They also could tell us that they didn't hear any arguing. Those were all things that Amy had told the police had happened, and the kids told us that that wasn't true.
The children's statements were the most damning evidence against Amy's story of a robbery. But since they were only age 6 and 9, the prosecutors had been very reluctant to put them on the stand.
Nobody wanted those kids to be in the middle of this.
I don't think anybody wanted to go through that.
But after the bond hearing, the prosecutors felt they had no choice.
There was no way around it. We had to put them on the stand.
As soon as they heard that prosecutors planned to put her children on the stand, Amy and her attorney did their best to keep them from testifying.
That would be very difficult because I'm sure that the emotion and the trauma of being present in that environment would be so difficult to deal with.
But was that Amy's true motivation? Monitoring her calls to family members from jail, the authorities didn't think so. In one call, Amy discussed her 6-year-old son's difficulty understanding that his father was dead.
Now, a normal reaction would be, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that my son is going through this. Instead, she was glad. So in her mind, it was a good thing that her son was confused. That's the kind of mother she is. She was more concerned about whether or not her son was going to be found competent to testify against her than being at all concerned about the trauma that he is going through.
But to the prosecution's relief, the judge disagreed with Amy's assessment, ruling that both children were competent to testify in their mother's trial.
In order to prosecute this case, to make sure we had a conviction and we punished the defendant, we had to use the children.
Coming up, Amy goes back to court. But will her children testify? On September 21st, 2006, Amy Bosley was led into a Campbell County, Kentucky courtroom. Charged with the murder of her husband, Bob, the 37-year-old had spent the past year in jail, unable to make her $1 million bail. And despite strenuous effort at her July bond hearing, her attorneys had been unable to reduce it.
That was an event in and of itself. It was a 5-hour bond hearing where Jim Morgan questioned myself and other witnesses about stuff that really wasn't relevant.
But the bond hearing had undermined the prosecution's confidence in its case, prompting them to make a controversial decision, putting Amy's 2 small children on the stand.
Her children were witnesses in this case, and they were critical witnesses.
But would they ever testify? With the court date approaching, Bob's parents asked the prosecutor to cut Amy a deal.
They came to me and asked me if we would recommend the minimum sentence of 20 years. I was very reluctant to do that. I didn't think it was sufficient amount of time. I felt she deserved a lot more time than that.
Bob's parents didn't disagree, but punishing Amy wasn't their priority. It was protecting their grandchildren.
And those kids have been through enough. Why make a little girl
the minimum sentence of 20 years?
On the morning of September 24th, before a packed courtroom, Amy Bosley pled guilty to Bob's murder.
The defendant committed the offense of murder, a capital offense when she intentionally or wantonly caused the death of Robert Bosley by shooting him with a gun. Ma'am, did you do that?
Yes, sir.
Following the terms of the plea deal, the judge ordered Amy to serve 20 years in prison for the first-degree murder of her husband. With good behavior, she could be out in 17. As for why Amy agreed to take the plea bargain, opinions differ. Supporters say she wanted to protect her children.
That was why Amy pled, because the children would have had to testify, and she was not going to put them through that.
But investigators aren't so sure. For them, many questions remain unanswered.
There was a lot of money that was unaccounted for, there's no doubt about it. There are those that believe that she has the money stashed someplace and that I guess someday when she gets out of jail, she's going to go retrieve that money and that she'll have it to live on for the rest of her life.
And for Bob's family, the biggest question of all may never be answered.
This is kind of sad when you're a mom and a dad of a child and you don't know why he got murdered. That's sad. That's sad. Maybe before we die, maybe we'll learn why.
With a weakness for men in uniform.
She ordered with the guys. She gets you going.
She was one of those individuals that seems to like police officers.
She even married one.
He rolled in that one evening and he said, "We're gonna get married." I said, "You lost your damn mind."
And 2 years later, she met another.
She told all of us that she was divorced.
It wasn't entirely true. Was it just a little white lie?
Oh, come on, nobody's that stupid.
Or did it mask a deadly secret?
His death, either a suicide or a homicide.
January 22nd, 2001, a couple of Forsyth County, Georgia firefighters arrived at the apartment of Randy Thompson. It wasn't exactly an emergency call.
Several of his friends called and he didn't answer the phone, and they went over there to see why Randy wasn't answering his cell phone or his home phone.
A fellow firefighter and former sheriff's deputy, Randy had spent the past few days battling what he thought was either food poisoning or a serious stomach virus.
He was vomiting a lot, actually dry heaving because I'm sure there was nothing there, but very, very sick.
He'd even been to the emergency room a few days earlier.
All the signs pointed to a stomach virus or to food poisoning.
Back home, Randy had spent much of the weekend in bed, tended by his girlfriend, Lynn Turner.
Sunday afternoon, Lynn said she went by and carried him some food, some chicken soup.
And the following morning, his friends from the fire department had come by to check on him.
He actually had a doctor appointment that a friend of his was going to take him to.
But there was no answer at the door.
Nobody can get in, he's not answering the phone.
Randy was home, however. Looking in the window, the firefighters could see their friend sprawled out on the sofa. But he didn't appear to be napping.
Randy didn't respond at all to knocks, yells. My husband was a volunteer firefighter, so I turned on his pager and I could hear the two-way talk on the radio. So I knew that they were there. I knew something at that point was really wrong.
Worried for his friend, one of the firefighters quickly kicked in the door. But it was too late.
Randy was already dead.
Randy's family and friends were devastated.
He and I were very, very close. He was my firstborn, my only son.
Lynn, however, appeared to be stoic about Randy's death.
She did not act like she was grieving, but Lynn was a very strong person. She stuffed a lot of things. So, that was how I took it. She was just stuffing that morning.
Was the tragedy truly a surprise?
Randy had attempted suicide. He had done before.
Or was it a deadly case of deja vu? A curvy brunette in a brand new Camaro. People were quick to notice when 27-year-old Lynn Turner returned home to Cumming, Georgia in 1994.
Lynn was very flashy. She always had a flashy car. She always had plenty of money.
She always had plenty of men clamoring for her attention, too.
She flirted with the guys. She gets you going.
Although in 1994, Lynn had her sights on one guy in particular, Randy Thompson.
Randy and Lynn met each other here in the county through a mutual acquaintance, someone that Lynn had gone to high school with and someone who actually worked with Randy and was friends with Randy.
I couldn't understand why she was chasing Randy like she was. I mean, at first, he just was not interested. She was very, very persistent.
Part of the attraction may have had something to do with Randy's career.
Randy initially worked in the sheriff's department. He left there and became a fireman.
He was one of those individuals that seems to like police officers and law enforcement, and she hung around with them a lot.
Since leaving home at 21, Lynn had not only worked as a 911 dispatcher in neighboring Cobb County, she had even married a member of the force.
It was typical of a lot of marriages. Basically, marriage just grew apart. They went their separate directions.
She told all of us, including Randy, that she was divorced.
When she first met Randy, Lynn was still living in Cobb County. But once they started dating, she was incoming at every opportunity.
She started coming down here during the week, every weekend, spending an awful lot of time down here.
She also did her best to win over Randy's family. Christmas 1994, she showered the family with gifts.
She bought my husband and I a real nice stereo and CD thing combined, bought our two daughters nice gifts from Victoria's Secret. We had just met the girl, and here she was buying all this extravagant stuff.
3 months later, Lynn was back home for good.
She and Randy moved into an apartment here in Cumming.
It was only temporary. That summer, Lynn discovered she was pregnant. She began preparing for the new addition by buying a house.
It was a ranch. It was all one level, a big open area, which was like dining room, living room, kitchen.
And the house was only one of Lynn's many purchases.
She furnished the house, and she had helped Randy buy a new car, and she was just having everything new all the time. And I finally asked her, how can you afford this? And she said that it was her inheritance from her grandmother.
Lynn gave birth to a baby girl in January of 1996.
She was a very loving mother. She was a very good mother.
But just as Lynn appeared to be settling down, her relationship with Randy became increasingly unstable.
The relationship would be good, but as time passed and as they stayed together, it was volatile.
Tumultuous would be a good way to describe it.
And after the baby was born, their problems seemed to intensify.
They couldn't get along. They just couldn't get along. I mean, they were always jealous of each other. She was very possessive of Randy.
Randy moved out several times.
And the drama didn't stop there.
There had been a couple of half-hearted suicide attempts that Randy had made.
The first time, it was Lynn who dialed 911 and reported that Randy had tried to overdose on painkillers.
Paramedics responded and decided that Randy posed no threat to himself or anybody else, just left him at home.
2 years later, Randy had picked up the phone himself and sent a friend who took him to the ER.
It was really just an attempt for attention.
Whatever Randy's motivation, the suicide attempts led to a reconciliation with Lynn.
They always did a lot better when he needed her. When he was sick or when he needed something, I think she got self-worth from people needing her.
In 1998, the couple had a second child. But by April of 1999, Randy had moved out again. And this time, he said it was for good.
Randy finally decided that he couldn't take it anymore.
They had just had it. They were like oil and water.
Randy wasn't entirely out of Lynn's life, however. The couple did have 2 children together.
Once they split up and Randy moved out, they still stayed in contact with each other. There was definitely a connection there.
But there was plenty of animosity, too.
Randy would come to make arrangements to see the children, and if Randy did the least little thing to make her mad, she wouldn't let him see them.
In October of 2000, minor sinus surgery produced some major side effects on Randy's health.
He had had a lot of problems. He had a staph infection. He had had a stent put in, close to his heart to give him intravenous antibiotics.
By the following January, Randy appeared on the road to a full recovery.
He was supposed to have that stent out because he was better.
There were signs his relationship with Lynn might improve too. In the middle of the month, Lynn called and suggested the family get together for dinner at a local steakhouse.
Friday night, Randy had had dinner with Lynn and their children.
Randy was still hoping because of the children. He wanted to work things out with her and make the children a home.
Afterwards, they went back to Lynn's for dessert. But Randy didn't stay the night.
I had called him that night to see how things had gone. He said, not well.
And unfortunately for Randy Thompson, things wouldn't get any better. January 21st, 2001. It was a little before lunchtime when Randy received a call from his friend Melanie Harper.
I called him to ask him if he wanted to go to eat with us. He had been sick all day, he'd been vomiting, asked me if we would come over.
Concerned about their friend,
just kind of in and out, kind of with us and then not with us.
Was it yet another suicide attempt?
He over-medicated himself a great deal. As a matter of fact, they gathered up all the pills in the house and flushed them because they were afraid that he overdosed and that he would lose his job.
Randy's friends rushed him to the emergency room.
They pretty much told me that he had a stomach virus.
They gave him some fluids and some other treatment and got to feeling better and sent him home.
Lynn dropped by several times to help care for Randy as he recovered from his sudden ailment.
She had come over on a couple of occasions.
She went over to his apartment and took him some tea, and also she had taken him something to eat.
On Monday morning, January 22nd, some of Randy's friends dropped back by the apartment to check on him. But Randy didn't answer the first knock or the second.
They're at his apartment. Nobody can get in. He's not answering the phone.
Randy wouldn't come to the door. His truck was there, and they got permission to break the door and go in.
And when his friends kicked in the door, they found Randy dead on the sofa.
He was lying on his back, stretched out. It appeared that if you just glanced at him, that he might be asleep.
Coming up, did Randy die from natural causes?
He had been feeling so sick.
Or had he finally followed through and left Lynn forever?
She said Randy had committed suicide.
Boyfriend Randy Thompson, lying dead on his sofa. He was only 32 years old.
He was young and he had just been to see his
complications. Randy had recently suffered from fairly serious staph infection.
There was some thought that perhaps his death was related to that infection.
Maybe the antibiotic was too strong for his system because I think they have to treat that pretty aggressive.
But during Randy's autopsy, the state medical examiner made a startling discovery. It looked as if a foreign substance had overwhelmed Randy's system. But it wasn't an antibiotic.
I looked at all the slides of Randy Thompson and I saw that there were crystals in his kidneys that looked like ethylene glycol crystals.
Ethylene glycol is a chemical that cannot be produced naturally in the body. The only way that ethylene glycol could end up in a person's body would be for it to be ingested.
Primarily found in antifreeze, ethylene glycol is readily available, and in the right doses, it can be deadly.
The textbook answer for how much ethylene glycol it takes to result in someone's death is that as little as 100 cc's. We're talking about a third of a soda can.
But why would someone drink antifreeze?
Vast majority of ethylene glycol deaths that we see in our office are suicides.
Randy did have a history of suicide attempts. Had he finally succeeded? Or was there another explanation? What if Randy didn't know he was drinking antifreeze?
Ethylene glycol is odorless and tasteless except for a slightly sweet taste. So if I take regular antifreeze, and especially some that may be clear, and put it in any food, you're not going to know it's there.
His death was either going to be a suicide or a homicide.
That was assuming the crystals Dr. Capone saw were ethylene glycol. To be sure, he sent tissue samples from Randy's kidneys and urine to the state crime lab for further analysis.
We could not definitively say it was there because the response that was produced on analysis was not large enough.
In the light of the negative ethylene glycol test, I had to come up with another reason why he had these crystals in his kidneys.
As a result, the official cause of death ruled out both suicide and homicide.
I went with the anatomic diagnosis that I had, which was that he had a slightly enlarged heart.
State crime lab did not think that there was any issue as to death. Basically, it chalked it up to cardiac dysrhythmia.
But was the case closed? Not as far as Randy's mom was concerned.
I knew something was wrong. I didn't think it was a natural death.
At first, Nita's conviction that her son had died due to foul play was merely a hunch. But then she received a note that changed everything. The note came from a woman named Catherine Turner. Her son was Glenn Turner, the man Lynn said she had divorced.
There was a bereavement card from Kathy, and I read it, and she had her phone number, and she had some of the things that had happened to Glenn in there.
I just was telling her who I was and why I was writing about my son.
One of the first things she told Nita was that her son Glenn wasn't Lynn's ex-husband. He was her late husband.
I found out at that time that Lynn and Glenn were still married when she was seeing Randy.
Lynn and Glenn had met in 1992. At the time, Lynn was a Cobb County 911 dispatcher, and Glenn was a county police officer.
It started out as, let's just put it this way, to be polite, a one-night stand.
That may have been how it started, but Glenn soon fell for Lynn. He proposed a year later.
He rolled in that one evening and he said, "We're going to get married." I said, "You lost your damn mind."
The couple married on August 21st, 1993. Unfortunately, as with Randy years later, constant bickering marred the relationship. The arguments were mostly about money.
Lynn unfortunately had what my parents used to refer to as champagne taste on a beer budget.
Glenn worked more than one job. Lynn worked more than one job.
Lynn was also gone a lot, and she began making frequent trips back to her hometown 30 miles away in Cumming, Georgia.
He would go down on the weekend telling Glenn that she was working undercover for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations.
But back in Cobb County, rumors started circulating that Lynn's work in Cumming was more under the covers than undercover.
I had heard suspicions that she was having an affair, but I didn't have any hard facts, just suspicion.
He had to know deep down in she was doing something, because you get your new bride and you stopped having sex after about probably 60 days, 90 days into the marriage. She said she had a female problem. Oh, come on, nobody's that stupid.
But when Glenn suddenly fell ill on March 2nd, 1995, Lynn was there to take him to the emergency room.
Doctor said, "I think you got a virus." Something like that. 24, 48 hours, you'll be all right. Send him home.
The next morning, it appeared that Glenn was feeling better. Lynn made him a light lunch before going out to run errands.
He got up and drank some stuff, ate some stuff, some Jell-O.
When Lynn returned, she had found Glenn sprawled out on the bed, not breathing. Minutes later, Glenn's colleagues received an alert no cop wants to hear.
A pager went off, and it had 63 on there, and 63 meant signal 63, officer down.
Glenn Turner was dead, and according to the autopsy, it was due to natural causes.
The medical examiner told me that he'd had an enlarged heart. That'll happen to him because they're physical and they do a lot of workouts and stuff, and then all of a sudden they quit.
It was the same diagnosis Randy's mother received. And much like Nita Thompson, Catherine Turner had a hard time believing her son had died from natural causes.
He was a strapping, healthy young man, 31 years of age. To die that quickly and under flu-like symptoms and not ever being sick until he got sick this time, something was wrong.
But even as Catherine Turner struggled to deal with her son's death, her daughter-in-law Lynn was moving on.
Days after Glenn Turner's death, she moved in with Randy Thompson.
6 years later, Randy would be dead, and Catherine Turner would be on the phone with his mother.
Kathy and I started comparing notes about Glenn's death and Randy's death, and everything was so much the same. The illness, the way they were sick.
It was amazing. She wouldn't hardly give me a chance to talk. I mean, she was telling me all the things that she was telling me was just exactly what I had gone through.
The next day, Randy's mother contacted Dr. Kaponen at the state medical examiner's office.
That's when I first learned about Lynn Turner and the death of her first husband.
The medical examiner found out that Lynn had been married and that her husband had passed away rather unexpectedly.
Was it merely a coincidence?
I had a very strange feeling when they left my office because all this other information was very concerning to me. And so at that point I went and talked to the toxicologist and see what they could do about re-examining their dad.
And when the toxicologist recrunched his numbers from Randy's toxicology analysis, he realized he'd made a critical mistake.
In fact, what I thought was an insignificant quantity of ethylene glycol was actually 10 times larger.
The medical examiner ruled Randy Thompson's death to be a homicide by ethylene glycol.
Forsyth County authorities immediately opened a murder investigation, and Lynn Turner was at the top of their suspect list.
She was the person who had been with him shortly before he became ill, so she had the opportunity.
And if Randy had been murdered, what about Glenn Turner?
I got a copy of Glenn's autopsy report and I reviewed the microscope slides. And it's when I reviewed those slides that I saw the oxalate crystals.
When he saw the slides of the kidney, found out the calcium oxalate crystals, notified the medical examiner here, and then the body was exhumed.
While forensic specialists collected samples from Glenn's body, Cobb County reopened the investigation into his death. And it wasn't long before Lynn was at the top of their suspect list, too.
Lynn was the common denominator between Randy and Glenn.
There was also the affair with Randy Thompson that started well before Glenn's death. But would it be enough to convince a jury to convict her of murder?
There was nothing at the scene to indicate foul play, and the medical examiner couldn't or didn't find anything in the autopsy. There was really no investigation into his death as being a homicide until after Randy Thompson's death.
Flipping through photos taken at the time of Glenn's death, investigators stumbled across an intriguing possibility. Did a snapshot from the Turner's garage contain a potential crucial clue overlooked 6 years earlier?
Can of antifreeze shows up, but I didn't think nothing about it. I mean, it was a garage, and you're gonna have things like that in your garage.
Unfortunately for Lynn, her garage wasn't the only place investigators found antifreeze.
Medical examiner here, after he has exhumed the body, found the ethylene glycol, issued another death certificate that shows that the death is homicide.
I slammed my hand down on the desk, and I knew it.
By the end of October, as Forsyth County authorities continued to build their case against Lynn and Randy's death, Cobb County investigators were ready to act. On November 1st, 2002, the Cobb County District Attorney's Office charged Lynn Turner with the first-degree murder of her husband, Glenn.
Lynn was indicted on one count of murder, and she ultimately turned herself into the Cobb County Sheriff's Office.
Coming up, prosecutors struggled to put the poison in Lynn's hands.
This was a circumstantial case entirely.
And Lynn prepares to face a jury of her peers.
Lynn, people are calling you a murderer, is that true?
April 26, 2004. 3 years after Randy Thompson had been found dead on his sofa, his girlfriend Lynn Turner went on trial for murder. But while she was a suspect in Randy's death, it wasn't his murder she was on trial for. Instead, she was charged with the 1995 death of her husband, Glenn Turner.
Both men had died the same way, by ethylene glycol poisoning.
Cause of death wasn't the only thing the two men had in common, however.
The primary connection between those two is Lynn. I think that was the biggest problem that we had to overcome in the case.
And under Georgia law, Randy's death would be a crucial factor in the current trial.
The law here in Georgia allows...
Even though she had yet to be formally charged in his murder.
We felt, obviously, that should not be done, but the court allowed that in.
And when the prosecution delivered it open that morning, the DA was quick to capitalize on the opportunity.
The evidence will show that there is one link, there is one thread, there is one common denominator, and it's this woman, Julia Lynn Womack Turner.
According to the prosecutors, Lynn had murdered her husband partly to facilitate her affair with Randy. But it wasn't her only motive. There was also money. The fortune Lynn had spent buying and furnishing her new home incoming.
From my understanding, the reason she had money was because her grandmother had died previously and she inherited a good amount of money from that.
That's what Lynn had told Randy and his family, at least. But it was entirely true, prosecutors claimed. Lynn had inherited some money from her grandmother, but the big windfall had been Glenn's death.
Lynn actually benefited in a couple of ways when Glenn died. There was the death benefits that the county has, which was several $1,000s.
There was also a $100,000 life insurance policy that listed Lynn as the beneficiary.
She had Glenn change the beneficiary on his policy, life insurance policy, before they actually got married, while they were still engaged.
In addition to Glenn's death benefits and insurance, Lynn also cashed in on her late husband's pension.
Because they had been married long enough, she would draw his pension. So he was drawing $600-something a month from his pension in addition to the life insurance benefits.
Her motivation was money all the way around. I don't think you can get anybody that'll say anything differently.
The state then told the jury that Lynn had killed her husband by spiking Jell-O, soup, and sweet tea with ethylene glycol-rich antifreeze.
Ethylene glycol is reported as having a sweet taste to it. And so ethylene glycol can be hidden in a number of foods or drinks that have a sweet taste.
Next, toxicologists testified that evidence of ethylene glycol poisoning was found in both Glenn's and Randy's kidneys.
Byproducts of ethylene glycol are oxalate crystals, and the oxalate crystals deposit in the tubules in your kidneys and result in renal failure, which is not a pleasant way to die.
The state then called witness from a local animal shelter who testified that Lynn had inquired about the effects of ingesting antifreeze.
Lynn had called up there asking about poison and stuff, about as far as it would take to kill a human being compared to a dog, how much it would take.
But were all her questions hypothetical?
She also inquired how the veterinarians there would put animals down, and they told her that they didn't know the name of it, but what the vets used was purple stuff.
She had asked me, could anybody get it? It was easy to get a hold of, and I told her no, it was a controlled substance.
It was a revelation that caught many in the courtroom off guard.
I mean, when I heard that, I thought, there's any doubt now, that's pretty much a nail in the coffin. I thought that was critical.
One person in the courtroom who wasn't noticeably moved by the state's case, though, was Lynn herself.
You mean you would be hard to notice that she was the one that was on trial for murder? Giggling, laughing, cutting up, walking around the court area. I mean, just she didn't look real stressed out or concerned. Just very cool, calm, and in control.
Why was Lynn so unconcerned about the charges against her? According to her attorney, part of it was simply her personality.
She doesn't show emotion very well. That's the way she is. She internalizes everything.
But as her defense team pointed out in their opening arguments, Lynn also had reason to be confident. The prosecution's case had one large problem. There was no physical evidence that could prove Lynn had introduced the antifreeze into Glenn's system.
Who introduced it, if it was introduced? The state cannot show that in this case.
I think most prosecutors would like to have as much tangible evidence as you can have. In this particular case, we didn't really have that much.
In fact, Lynn's counsel argued that the presence of oxalate crystals in Glenn's kidneys didn't necessarily mean he was poisoned at all.
Some crystals are formed naturally. There is ethylene glycol in some embalming fluid. The funeral home, when we were dealing with the investigation of the case, could not find the records of what embalming fluid was used.
He also attacked the methodology that was used in testing the bodily organs to determine whether or not there was any ethylene glycol present in Glenn Turner's internal organs.
But in their closing arguments to the jury, the prosecution countered the defense's claim by reminding jurors that Randy's kidneys had also contained evidence of ethylene glycol.
It would be highly unlikely that two people would die of exactly the same poisoning and have a relationship with one woman.
But highly unlikely didn't necessarily mean beyond a reasonable doubt. Would the jury believe the state's circumstantial case was enough to convict?
This was a circumstantial case entirely, and that is sometimes a little more difficult to convince a jury just based on these circumstances.
When the case went to the jury, Glenn's mother was confident her son would finally get some justice.
There was nothing I was concerned about as far as the trial went. I felt like everybody did a fantastic job.
Lynn appeared just as confident of an acquittal.
And some of the news reporters, they were out to dinner and Lynn walked up to the table to him in the restaurant. They were drinking a beer. She said, "Oh, I'll have one of those tomorrow night." And they said, "Oh, you will?" She said, "Oh, yeah. All this junk will be over with. I'll have one of those tomorrow night."
Coming up, tension mounts as the jury returns its verdict.
You've got 12 people who have got to view all the evidence the same way that you have viewed it.
Lynn Turner walked into the courthouse alongside her attorneys for the close of her murder trial. Charged with poisoning her husband with antifreeze, the 35-year-old faced life in prison if convicted. After receiving instructions from the judge, the jury broke for deliberations. While confident in their case, without a so-called smoking gun, the prosecution knew that anything could happen.
I was as concerned when it went to the jury about what they were going to do as I was when we started. You've got 12 people who have got to view all of the evidence the same way that you have viewed it.
5 hours later, the jury announced it had reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Julia Lynn Womack Turner, guilty of malice murder as alleged in count 1 of the indictment.
Indebtedness, the lifestyle, all of those things that when you put all the pieces together, they basically took place of the smoking gun.
It was no big deal.
How could someone sit there and listen to these things and have no reaction, either anger or sadness?
Apparently because it hadn't yet dawned on Lynn just what life in prison meant.
When we learned the deputy that was taking her across, she said, "My attorneys will be over here in a minute. How long do you think it'll take them to set bail for me?" She said, "Man, do what?" He says, "How long you think I'm hungry? How long do you think it's going to take my attorneys to get over here and get my bail set?" She says, "Man, you just got convicted of malice murder. You're not going anywhere."
Actually, she would going somewhere, to a Georgia prison to serve a life sentence for murder. But she was back in court in October of 2004. There, 5 months after being convicted of killing Glenn Turner, she was formally charged with the murder of Randy Thompson.
Charging you with murder, having committed the crime of murder. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
We plead not guilty, Your Honor.
Forsyth County authorities saw things differently, of course. According to the indictment, Lynn had followed up Glenn's murder by poisoning Randy almost 6 years later. And once again, the alleged motive was insurance money.
With Randy, she stood on one policy to get $200,000.
Lynn's motivation was money and greed. That's all she thought about, was money and what she could get with the money.
Lynn's second trial began on March 12, 2007, and this time the stakes were much higher.
The prosecution had filed its intention to seek the death penalty, so the jury is the one who determines punishment in that circumstance. They had the choice of life with the possibility of parole, life without parole, or death.
But while the stakes had certainly risen, the prosecution's open would have sounded awfully familiar to anyone who had followed Lynn's first trial. The state's evidence, witnesses, and case against Lynn remained largely the same.
Any time that the prosecution has what's called a similar transaction, where you had this first case that was so much like our case, and then there had been the conviction, that always helps.
When Lynn's attorney presented his open, he added a new wrinkle to the proceedings. In marked contrast to Glenn's trial, the defense didn't deny that Randy had died of ethylene glycol poisoning, but that didn't mean he had been murdered.
We felt that Randy may have ingested the ethylene glycol himself.
Her defense team wanted people to think that Randy had committed suicide.
As proof, they pointed to Randy's history of suicide attempts.
Randy had a problem with taking prescription pills. He over-medicated himself a great deal. One specifically where he had overdosed, had to go to the hospital.
And why would Randy commit suicide on this particular occasion? According to the defense, the Friday night fight with Lynn was only one factor.
His financial condition was very poor. He was behind in pretty much everything. They were getting ready to take his truck. Just a lot of things, I think, in Randy's life that weren't going well.
Would any of Randy's friends confirm the assertion? Although called by the prosecution, Melanie Harper came close when questioned by the defense. On the stand, she admitted that Randy's friends hadn't ruled out the possibility of a suicide attempt.
We believed that he was probably toxic. He had taken too much medication.
Would the suicide angle be enough to raise reasonable doubt and allow Lynn to escape a death sentence? In closing arguments, the prosecutors did their best to defuse it.
The only rumors that have been introduced in this case were those that the defense asked about in their questioning of the witnesses.
Instead, the prosecution asked the jurors focus on the facts and the unlikely set of coincidences that connected Randy and Glenn.
There were so many similar circumstances that was amazingly alike. I mean, freakishly alike.
But according to the prosecutors, the ultimate thing Glenn and Randy had in common was the woman who killed them.
For her, they represented things like down payments on boats, cars, and finally just a way to keep her lights and cell phone on. They were worth so much more to her dead than they ever were alive.
When it was the defense's turn, Lynn's attorneys argued there was a good reason the prosecution's case dwelled on coincidence. It was all they had.
The evidence isn't there. They can't tell you when this happened, where it happened, how it happened, because there's no evidence. And they can surmise, they can predict, they can assume, but that ain't the law.
Coming up, Is coincidence enough to condemn Lynn to death?
You can save a life, or you can take a life.
On March 24, 2007, Lynn Turner was seated at a defendant's table for the second time. The 38-year-old widow was awaiting the verdict in her second capital murder trial. She faced the possibility of death if convicted. In the crowded courtroom, the jury foreperson read the verdict aloud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty this the 24th day of March 2007.
Lynn, of course, did not react to the verdict. She has not reacted really to any of the verdicts, but that's her personality.
Besides, jurors weren't done with Lynn just yet. 3 days after the verdict, they reconvened to decide her ultimate fate.
You have here a unique ability. You can save a life, or you can take a life.
The jury had the choice of life with a possibility of parole, life without parole, or death. And in Forsyth County, she received a sentence of life without parole.
I was disappointed. These were cold-blooded killings that required thought, premeditation, some planning, and they were solely for money. I thought she deserved to die.
For Glenn and Randy's loved ones, though, the fact that Lynn will never be able to...
A woman, and she's getting her punishment. And I just leave be.